Hi guys, what's up? Uh, as some of you will probably know, I'm going to be sharing chapter one of my Star Wars fan fiction. The Star Wars fan fiction is set after Jedi Survivor and it carries on the story of Cal Kestis. So if you don't know the story of Fallen Order and Survivor, either play the games or look the story up. Just so you have the context and you know why they're where they are and why characters are potentially the way they are and all of that, etc., etc., etc. Also, let it be known that I'm not an officially published author. I'm not a licensed author. I'm just a guy who likes Star Wars, likes writing. So therefore, I thought I would write some fan fiction, get in the ring myself, show what I can do. That being said, feedback's always welcome. If you've got any, feel free to leave a comment. And yeah, let's get into it. Here is the first chapter. It had been 2.5 years since Bode's death, and Cal was only feeling worse. His whole life, he had tried to make a stand against the Empire. He had slain the Knight's sister. He killed countless troops. He worked under Saw Gerrera for years, and he even took down the whole Imperial base by himself. Yet in the grand scheme of things, he hadn't even made a dent. The Empire had only grown stronger, and he was only getting weaker. There were millions upon millions of Empire personnel and only one of him. Grease was right. It was a rigged game, and the odds were not in his favour. But Cal's mentors had bravely sacrificed themselves fighting the Empire. His master, the Jedi Order, everyone he lost, they all died because of the Empire. And he would never forget that. He couldn't just give up the fight because the odds were against him. He had to keep trying, because, as Jar Tapal had told him when he died, this war is not over, my Padawan. And the Empire had only grown stronger since Tapal's death. The war was still not over, and he had to win. It was what Jar Tapal would have wanted. Tapal wouldn't like it if Cal backed away from the war and started a family. He hadn't taught Cal to be a parent. He had taught Cal how to fight. Tapal had also said that persistence revealed the path. If he was just persistent, surely he could win eventually. Get some allies, train them, collapse the Empire, and bring peace to the galaxy. Only it wasn't that simple. It was an ongoing battle in his head. Sometimes it felt like his life and cause were completely worthless. He'd fought for too long and accomplished too little. He'd made some difficult decisions over the years, some of which he was coming to regret now. He'd lost many people close to him, some of whom he now felt he could have saved. He used to have a purpose in life, but now he just felt lost. His desire to fight the Empire had split up the Mantis crew some years ago. Now they were together again, but it wasn't the same anymore. They thought he was losing his way. They thought he had changed. And Cal hated to admit it, but they were right. He had changed. He wasn't the same Cal who had bravely ventured to Bogano to grab the holocron from Trilla. He wasn't the same Cal who had made a stand against one of the most dangerous Sith Lords of all time. He wasn't the same Cal who had been so eager to help the Hidden Path. He wasn't the same Cal who had passionately made love with Merrin on Jedha. He didn't even know who he was anymore. A few years ago, he'd had a chat with Grease, who said he needed to find a home, settle down, and start a family. Well, he'd done it. He'd finally found somewhere away from the Empire, somewhere where he could settle down in peace, start a family, like Grease said. Only he was a terrible father. It seemed like nothing could go his way. His quest to rebuild the Jedi Order had ended with the holocron destroyed, and the Force-sensitive children left roaming the galaxy alone. In other words, it was a failure. His quest to train the Hidden Path on Tanalorr had ended with him realizing Bode was right. The Hidden Path were a bunch of strangers. Their safety was not his business, but it would become his business if he led them all to Tanalorr. And it wasn't like Tanalorr was completely unreachable. The Nile invaders had managed to reach it all those years ago. If anything happened to them while they were on Tanalorr, Cal would feel responsible. And that was a level of responsibility that he wasn't prepared to handle. In other words, the hidden path was a failure too. And Cal Kestis was sick of failing. He sighed and started pacing up and down to try to calm his thoughts. His thoughts, which were like a heavy weight on his consciousness, threatened to break him at any given moment. Cal didn't want to admit it, but fighting the Empire for years had tired and weakened him physically and mentally. He wanted to think of himself as strong, but he knew that he could only take so much before he broke. Cal walked over to Seer's grave and sat down. He sighed again and found himself slouching his posture, looking at the ground as if answers were buried somewhere under, and he could will them to come to him with the Force. He sat there and felt the Force for a few seconds, putting his hand on the ground, but it was no use. Nothing came to him. He felt as lost and low as ever. He looked up at Seer's grave, shook his head, and got up again. His connection to the Force had worsened greatly since Bode's death. It felt damaged, as if there was a break in it. A break that he was very inconsistent at bypassing, and could never fully fix, no matter how hard he tried. The damage wasn't as quite as severe as it had been while he was on Bracca, but he feared that the damage would keep getting worse. At that moment, Cal heard a noise and started, suddenly unholstering his saber and looking around. It was only a bird in the sky, but for whatever reason, noises troubled him way more than they used to. He reholstered his saber and walked away from the graves, not sure where he was going, but just knowing that he wanted some peace and quiet, away from everyone and everything, where not even a bird could disturb his thoughts. Eventually, Cal sat under a tree and put his head in his hands. Part of him wanted to leave Tanalorr and start disposing of as many Empire personnel as possible. But part of him wanted to stay on Tanalorr and try to bond with everyone. He'd become distant from everyone since Bode's death, unable to tolerate company for long periods of time, and unable to feel at ease even in familiar company. For whatever reason, he just seemed unable to form conversation the way he used to. Grease had once asked him, "What happened to you, Cal? You seemed genuinely pleased to see me on Kobo. But now you hardly talk to anyone, you always seem to want to be alone, you've rarely got much to say, and you seem bothered by every little thing now." Cal also remembered Grease had been hugging him as he spoke. "I want to help you, Cal, but I can't until you tell me what's wrong. Please, I'll even keep it a secret from the others if you want me to. Just tell me what's wrong." Everything Grease had said was correct, and it wasn't like Cal didn't want to be helped. He just never seemed able to explain what was wrong. He remembered that after Grease had asked him to say what was wrong, he hadn't been able to answer. He'd been stumped. After a minute, he walked away, frustrated at himself and his inability to put his demons into words. This was why he was alone most of the time now. Conversation was difficult. Almost every time he engaged, it seemed like he got asked the question, "What's wrong, Cal?" in one way or another. And he hated being asked that question. He hated being asked the question because he was never able to answer properly. A few times he had said, "I don't know," which never seemed satisfactory. A few times he snapped in anger and scared even himself. But most of the time, all he could do was walk away with a frustrated sigh. He even walked around without beady on his back now. And he never used to do that. Cal shook his head and moved his aching knee joints. One of them cracked audibly as he did so. In fact, his whole body ached. He sighed again and got up, walking back towards the mantis. Grease will probably be cooking food there right now. "Hello, Carter," Merrin said as she walked onto the mantis. Carter was sitting on a bench, affectionately caressing herself and seemingly lost in her own thoughts. Carter looked up and her sweet, innocent brown eyes met Merrin's. They looked at each other for a second, then Carter turned away without saying a word. Merrin had come to expect this. Carter was a quiet child, and rarely spoke. Merrin turned to look at Carter again. She was not smiling. "Is anything bothering you?" Merrin asked. Deep down, she knew something was. The Force was telling her that Carter was troubled, but asking Carter herself felt more natural. Carter sighed sadly and averted her eyes from Merrin's gaze, looking down towards the floor. Yes. Merrin felt relieved that Carter had told the truth. She had been hesitant to talk to them after losing Bode, and it had taken Merrin a lot of work to get her to open up. Night Sisters were not known for being affectionate, but Merrin thought that she had done a decent job. "What's bothering you, Carter? Tell me," Merrin asked affectionately, gently placing a hand on Carter's shoulder. Carter's eyes suddenly welled up with tears, and she squeezed Merrin's hand, hard enough to startle her. "It's Cal." Although Carter had used Papa to describe Bode up until he died, she had not taken to using the same nickname for Cal. "What about Cal?" Carter still squeezed Merrin's hand. Then the tears started to fall from her eyes, and she gently put her hand on Merrin's breast. "He doesn't spend time with me anymore. He doesn't play with me anymore. We never speak." Carter's voice cracked. "It's like he's—" Carter paused and started sobbing. Merrin was not used to a display of emotion like this, and it made her feel slightly uncomfortable. She shifted a little. Carter responded to this movement by letting go of Merrin's hand and wrapping her arms around Merrin. The sobbing stopped, but the tears still fell. "It's like he's forgotten about me. Papa—" She paused again. "Papa never forgot about me. Never. He always put me first, but Cal—" It was at this point that words failed Carter completely, and she began crying properly, letting go of Merrin as she did so. Merrin felt sorry for Carter. She was too naive to realize that Cal was having problems himself, but she was wise enough to know when a parent wasn't being a parent. Merrin stood up. "I'm going to have a serious talk with Cal, okay?" Carter didn't respond, but to look into her mind with the Force told Merrin that she had acknowledged what she'd said. Merrin walked out of the Mantis and sensed Cal's location. After a couple of seconds, Merrin saw where he was, walking towards a Mantis. She teleported using her magic and landed next to him. He didn't notice. Shortly after, she tapped him on the shoulder. As she did so, Cal looked around and saw her. He groaned a little and stopped walking. "I wish you'd just walk over like everyone else," he said, and fake chuckled in an attempt to be humorous, looking away. It didn't work. Merrin's love and anger towards Cal both rose to the surface abruptly, and she waited a few seconds before speaking. "Cal, look at me," Merrin said in the kindest voice she could muster, hating that she still sounded a little stern. Luckily, Cal didn't seem to pick up on it. He turned around and looked at her. "What do you want, Night Sister?" he asked tiredly. Merrin's anger abruptly rose at being called Night Sister. They had personally known each other for years, yet Cal sometimes called her Night Sister, as if she were just the same as all the other undead Night Sisters he had killed with his lightsaber when he went to Dathomir. "It's Carter," Merrin said, unable to keep the anger from creeping into her voice. "He's upset because you don't spend enough time with her." Cal sighed, and this only made her angrier. "It doesn't even seem like you try, Cal," she said, unable to stop herself from shouting at him. Cal shook his head. "Merrin, she's 10. She's too young to understand what I'm going through right now." "Maybe, but she's old enough to know that you're not being a good father to her." "Merrin, I try, I really do, but I just can't bring myself to—" Cal broke off. "I just don't really I just want to be alone these days. I don't know why. I promise you, I love Carter, really, I do. And I love you too. But I'm just finding life hard right now." Merrin's anger dissipated a little. "Cal, you haven't liked company for years. You haven't been the same since Bode died." She could tell by Cal's reaction that bringing Bode up was a mistake. "I'm sorry, Cal, I didn't mean—" Cal shook his head and clenched his fist in anger. "So now you're bringing Bode into this? You want to remind me that I killed her real father? I had to. I had no choice. I gave him multiple chances, and he still wouldn't back down. He might have been my friend whilst he was alive, but he mistreated his own daughter, Merrin. In a way, so do you, Merrin thought to herself, but quickly snatched the thought away before Cal could sense it. Cal, I'm sorry for bringing Bode up. I know how difficult that was for you. Cal seemed to calm down a little as she said this, which was a relief. But you need to spend more time with Carter. Your absence is hurting her, Cal, Merrin said worriedly, and the tone caught Cal's attention. You're hurting her, Cal. More than you realize. With that, she walked back towards the mantis. I'll be on the mantis if you need me, she said. Cal stood there for a few moments before he walked over to Bode's grave and picked up the charred corpse of Carter's Mookie doll. He held the doll in his hand for a few seconds, then threw it away. Oh, Bode, he said, fighting to keep himself from crying. Oh, Bode. He tried to say more but couldn't. He sat down on the floor near Bode's grave. The ground was cold and hard, but he hardly noticed. He had genuinely liked Bode as a friend while he was alive. Killing him was easily the hardest thing he had ever done. He repeatedly tried to remind himself that there was nothing else he could do, that Bode was too far gone, that he had given him multiple chances. But a part of him couldn't help wondering if something could have been done to save Bode. He wondered if killing Bode was part of the reason why he and Carter were having a hard time bonding. He had no memory of his blood father, having been taken away to join the Jedi Order when he was barely a toddler, so he couldn't really know how Carter felt. But he could imagine. And whenever he tried to imagine what he would feel like, the only thing he felt was pain. As Cal's mind wandered, troubled periodically by thoughts of Bode, he thought about how ironic the situation had become. After he had beaten Bode, Merrin had said that they were free, that they could build a family with Carter and Grease, that the four of them could be happy on Tanalorr together. Now the Empire was no longer a problem. Merrin had been right about one thing. The Empire, at least for now, was no longer a problem. But there was another problem, one which Cal thought was far worse than the Empire. That problem was himself. So there you go, guys. That's Chapter 1 of Star Wars Jedi The Haunting, aka Jedi Survivor 3, aka Jedi 3 fan fiction. Let me know if you like this chapter. Again, the link to AO3 will be in the description in case you want to read it there. And yeah, just leave a comment. Tell me what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And peace out.